Whoops. Good morning, guys. Joe from Treasure Farms, whitetail habitat specialist with Whitetail Habitat Solutions, alongside Jeff Sturgis and the gang. I hope everyone is doing well. Good morning. It is pretty cool this morning. It was about 55 degrees when we woke up, had the windows open, and just got here, just pulled in, got a little breakfast, a little coffee, and the deer were moving this morning. Had some nice ones and some pinches, and the nice thing is I have some things to do up here in the front, and I don't need to go back there right away and run them off. Since it's still cool, they could be kind of just hanging out in some of our sanctuaries. So have some fun with that later. Got some miscellaneous stuff to do, but one of the big things I wanted to talk to you guys today was switchgrass. And it's usually a big topic, and I know kind of our channel and Jeff, you know, people joke about switchgrass and how much we talk about it, but it does have a place, and it's great for people that you know, want to be kind of one and done for the most part with the perennial and get that established. But I'd say one of the most common things that I run into are failed stands of switch, and going over, you know, our processes with clients, and you know, ways to kind of make things easier, a little more foolproof. It's not something we can really skip a bunch of steps on. So I want to talk to you about that today. And the first thing I wanted to mention is when you guys are establishing switch, we recommend a 10 to 12 foot kind of minimum screen, you know, around our food plots and quite a few areas, but also, you know, it can be great for access. And even though this isn't necessarily access, you can see the kind of wall of switch that I have here. If you've been following along on the channel, we planted 12 to 14 or so acres of switch here. Numerous different reasons, whether it's just security, access, things like that, visibility from the road, which many of you also try to do. With that being said, don't hesitate to make your areas of switch wider where you want. And this is a good example where we do have a bit of ag out here in the front of the property, and we do access along the sides. And one area is mostly field. We have a drainage ditch that I don't want to mess with because deer sometimes bed pretty close on the neighbor's property. And for that reason, we leave the switchgrass quite a bit wider. And I'll show you kind of how that looks when we get out there a little bit later. Kind of like walking through a tunnel. And what you can do, for example, let's just take a 30-foot wide, you know, planting of switch. And then let's say we mow 8 feet or so down the middle for a nice path. You then have, you know, 11 feet on both sides of you, and it can make a nice wall as long as you get things done to make a nice stand, and it works great. If you need more of a buffer between where you are or where you're walking, maybe a road, your access, and let's say food, maybe you want more than just 10, 11, 12 feet, and that's perfectly fine. Plant it a little wider, and that's ultimately why I ended up having quite a bit more switch between certain areas and food. I wanted much more of a buffer. And so for that reason, I have some larger stands of switch that you can still do other things in the switch to add to it, but we don't per se want deer bedding between where we're walking, or too close to it anyways, and the food. It can be close, but I'm not gonna wanna have an area where I'm walking, not really hunting that area, and then I have, you know, like a bedding pocket right off of that, for example. That wouldn't make any sense. So we'll head out there here in a little bit and go over some of the other stuff. All right, guys, before we go over to that wall of switchgrass I have behind me, wanted to show you real quick. We are only just about 3 days exactly around this time frame from when we put our seed down on the food plot. And if you can, I hope you can possibly see some of that there. We have a little bit of our alfalfa brassica combo. If you look at it, you can see quite a bit more there. I don't know if it's better in the sun or the shade, but stuff is coming up rather quickly. Now, it was already moist. You can see some of my cultipacker lines. Only got to cultipack some of this just because it was so wet that the four-wheeler was just really getting bogged down at that point. I did not want to risk getting stuck and spending more and more time going backwards. So but anyway, this is part of a brassica, also then like a clover, chicory, alfalfa mix that we have over at WHS. And so the brassica really can kind of help that undergrowth and that clover and other stuff get going, especially for that following year. So for those of you that, you know, are looking for that after the initial year, it's a great option. So kind of back to the switchgrass real quick. So process-wise, guys, I know we talked a little bit about purpose briefly. Process-wise, we've started to change it up a little. Now, don't get me wrong, there are multiple ways to go about this. I frost seeded this, a very common way that people know about, but it doesn't necessarily have to be frost seeded. Some people try and get it going in the fall. And if you guys choose to wait a little bit, there is a way that I now try and lean towards, and that is same thing starting out with our sprayings. We're not putting our seed down. We're gonna go ahead and get our simazine, our pre-emergent, right? Pre-emergent would be before weeds have started to green up, so it feels a little weird. It's usually chillier and sometimes it's very wet, so it's kind of hard to time, but 2 to 3 weeks before spring green up for your area, you can put down 3 quarts of simazine, and that's going to help really set those weeds back. Now, month and a half later, weeds of course will still come up even where you've sprayed, and that's where, that's where we're going to go ahead and spray that kind of normal combination of glyphosate and 2,4-D, okay? That's going to give everything quite a good burn, so that'll be the second spraying. Now, your third spraying is when things get a little interesting, okay? If you don't have glyphosate resistant weeds, you tend to get a good kill with just using glyphosate, or Roundup, some call it. Then you don't really need to use 2,4-D in that last spraying. And what you can do is time a good rain, and I'm gonna really implore you to go ahead and try and find a drill, rent a drill, buy a drill, borrow a drill, some kind of no-till drill that has a small seed box where you can drill that seed in when the soil temps are warmer, well into the 50s, like late May, early June in this area, and you have a good rain coming. The cool benefit to that, guys, is you can do all these sprayings without worrying about emerging switchgrass and killing it in any of those sprayings. So you can go ahead and do these 3 sprayings, look for a good rain, and go ahead and drill it in. And within a couple of weeks, for sure, you should have, if all those things are met and you get sunlight, you should have some germinating switchgrass. So that is a way where we see people get some great stands. We're not tilling it up. We are not waiting until you know, the heat into July to try and do this, but try your best to kind of get in that parameter. Now, once that's done, you can still mow your switchgrass. So if for whatever reason you still have some fast growing weeds coming up around that switchgrass after a little bit of time, usually that first year, one good mowing will do the trick. Maybe a little bit of spot mowing if you have some that are near a tree line, and that tree line maybe is shading a little bit of an area. I know I don't have quite as good of growth back there by the tree line, and the weeds, you know, we're just a little more competitive. So that might be in July, and maybe one more late in July, August if needed. That was really my circumstance when I frost seeded and had a good bit of competition just with the delay in switchgrass and rains we had that year when I did it. Okay, so the only other spraying you can do after that, guys, is going to be a second simazine spraying in the second year. Same thing before spring green up, 2 to 3 weeks, 3 quarts per acre. Feels a little weird because you're going right over the switchgrass that's now brown and kind of dead at that point, but it'll still help set the weeds back a little bit that second year. So if your stand's mediocre, I also recommend that you do that. Now, if you've been paying attention, you've been following along or watching, you know, of course, the main WHS channel with Jeff, then you'll probably seen that he just started to recommend a herbicide option in the second and third year if you guys are running into any trouble, okay? Always been kind of hesitant with this because if people overdo it, then, you know, you can still kill the switch or really set it back. So you got to be careful and really stick to these amounts and kind of time frames, okay? If you get a lot of Johnson grass, foxtail, you know, coming up, it's a fast grower and it can smother out a lot of switch, then quinclorac is a good option for you guys to spray in the second and third year. That second year, you might only be like 4 or 5 or so ounces per acre. And a third year, maybe you would only be in like 7 to 9 ounces or so per acre, right in there. And really, we don't want you guys spraying that until you are in kind of more of the summer range where Switchgrass is putting on a little bit of height. There's 3 leaves on that stem, so it's not just new growth for that year. And again, that's the 2nd and the 3rd year to help with that. And you can just drive over everything. And then of course the switchgrass, being an exponential grower, will start to grow much quicker as you get later into the summer and outcompete those weeds as some die that you just sprayed, okay? Another option to do that I haven't personally tested, I know Jeff did some this year. He'll probably bring us his results, which would be awesome. But using 2,4-D, you do hear about on social media. I like to be pretty, you know, foolproof when I bring you guys info, meaning, you know, I've done it or have been with someone that's done it and seen the results, and I'm comfortable bringing it to you guys. I don't like guessing or just kind of going off hearsay. But Jeff did a good spraying of about 1.5 pints per acre with 2,4-D, and again, right over. Now the benefit of 2,4-D is, you know, it's a broadleaf weed killer. So for me, for example, I have some of these, you know, mini poplar trees starting to come up, and that would be a perfect option to get rid of some of that and really just let that switchgrass take over. I think it's another good option possibly, guys, to use some of these sprayings when you don't want to mow. Let's say after 5-10 years, what have you, stuff starts to kind of come through the middle that we don't really need or want. And instead of doing a burn or just mowing a ton, running over rocks, things like that, we could just go over it with the sprayer and get rid of some of this stuff. This is not my best stand, but you can see still some great switchgrass, 6-7+ feet tall, which is awesome. So that is a great way, guys, to have numerous options: spray, mow. People can burn. I have had people have some not so excellent results burning, so I'm a little bit hesitant to do that. Just time-wise, I never really get to do anything, and you know, other burning applications I feel that really only have a benefit more in the south when deer are still eating some of that benefit and that regrowth from burn areas. In the wintertime, most of that stuff's, you know, already dead and gone regardless in the northern areas. So I hope that helps. Super excited we got the food plots going, they're germinating. If you guys are planning on doing switchgrass this coming spring, then I want you to take a look at where you're going to be planting. If you have super thick, thatchy areas, it might be worth doing a mow or a spray this fall, kind of get ready for some of that, so that when you come in for the simazine and then you do those 2 future sprayings, you're good to go. You're pretty much bare soil and you're rocking and rolling. I don't want anyone to kind of have that plan and then have a ultra thick kind of thatch on the ground where maybe even those small seeds would struggle to get down to the ground in that seed to soil contact, okay? The other thing is that 3rd spraying we talked about right before you're planting, late May, early June approximately in this area. If you have to use 2,4-D, go ahead and use 2,4-D. If you got some of those weeds around, mare's tail, etc., no point in just doing glyphosate and having some of that come up if you know you have it. In that case, if you do the 2 quarts per acre glyphosate, 1 pint per acre of 2,4-D, make sure you wait a couple of weeks before you drill. Since you're drilling and you're getting immediate seed to soil contact, if that seed germinates within a few days, etc., kind of like we're seeing right now, even though that's not switch, that 2,4-D residual could kill those seeds. So that would be a big kind of disappointment to go through all that work and then have that happen. I hope that helps, guys. Keep me posted if you run into any other issues, but I want you guys to be able to plan ahead and be ready for next spring so you can have a great stand to switch and help your access and all sorts of cool stuff. Any questions, let me know. We'll see you guys next time.